As we prepare for our trip to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to take in one of the best rivalries in college football, the Magnolia Bowl between LSU and Ole Miss, it's always a pleasure when our good friend Blake Ruffino of AYS Sports joins the airwaves to talk all things LSU Tigers and give us the insight from the LSU perspective. Blake, once again, appreciate you taking the time. It is a pleasure to have you on and so excited to talk about this game and more with you.
I don't think that the game is going to match up to what you're going to experience on Friday night when you finally come down to Baton Rouge and you see all these really beautiful Cajun women and we go out to eat, you and I, and it's going to be a party. And then the college scene's going to be right there where we're eating. I don't think that you're ready, Chris. I'm just going to be honest. By the way, I told you this. People are already camping out, dude. I don't know if you want me saying this. I'm sure you can clip it out. It's Wednesday. So listen, all right, now you look, is Blake a homer? That's what the fans are going to say. Okay. However, I know this place. There's not a lot of things that I know. Chris, I know how to make a good steak. I know how to do chores so my wife doesn't yell at me. And I know how to make sure that my kids behave. The other thing that I know is that this place on Saturday, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Death Valley, is going to be absolutely insane. I'm glad you're going to be there to experience it.
Yeah, Blake, I'm excited to bask in the glow kind of being with you of the mayor of Baton Rouge, essentially. I feel like you run the city, man. So
I don't know about
to get
that.
you out of the house and be with you in the city is going to be a real treat, man. I'm
that's what my wife said. She's like, how does this guy come down from where he's from to get you out of the house? I'm like, well,
get that old grizzly bear out his cave.
Yeah, he told me that we're going to eat food. And I'm like, you should know this. The weight in my heart is through my stomach, man.
Say less.
But yeah, but in the point I was trying to make and just reference to Chris, this place is going to be nuts. It's already, I'm telling you, like people think I'm a lunatic. People really think that my DMs, my mentions are filled. Chris, I had 97 mentions this morning on Twitter. Okay. People are like, oh, this dude's overblowing it. Ole Miss fans. I'm like, all right, you're gonna find out real quick and fast up in a hurry. Go right on ahead. It's coming.
Blake, it'll be my first ever night game experience in Death Valley because I made the trip in 2020 COVID. We don't count that. So this will be the real first ever experience. Cannot wait to get down there. We're going to be flying in on Thursday, and it's going to be a full weekend for us. Blake, before we get into the game itself on Saturday, I want to first talk what you've seen from LSU to this point. Tigers sit at 4-1. 1-0 in conference play. We all witnessed that game. I feel like, Blake, that's probably the last time a lot of folks saw LSU was that national spotlight at South Carolina. College game day was in town. Tigers find a way in the second half to pull that one out. The referees were the talk nationally, right? And everybody going crazy about that. Since then, LSU's beaten UCLA, South Alabama, and then, of course, is coming off of their bye week, which is a big factor in this football game, by the way. But if for someone that hasn't watched this LSU team since that South Carolina game, what has changed, if anything, and what have been your biggest impressions to this point as we enter this contest? Because, again, it's been a few weeks since then. How much has changed with this LSU football team, either positively or negatively?
I don't know if there's been much that's quote-unquote changed, Chris, other than that they're consistently inconsistent. Like, for example, who is the real LSU? I feel like I'm in an Eminem song in the early 2000s with a real Slim Shady, please stand up. But I think that it's just the simple nature of being consistently inconsistent. They have not played a four-quarter game. They have not showed that they can play a four-quarter game because they play up and down, Chris, to the level of their opponent, right? Like everybody comes out and says, well, what about Nichols? And I'm like, okay, well, what about USC and stopping their run game when USC goes over to Michigan, and I'm just going to call it what it is, bends over Michigan in the run game and starts smacking them cheeks all up and down the field. So I think that there comes a part where, Chris, I don't know who they are, right? Like I know what they can be. Like, for example, the first half versus South Alabama, it's about as flawless a football that you can have. Offense, defense, special teams, flawless that you can have. But then Garrett Nussmeier comes out and then throws 2 interceptions in the second, or I say second half. The one was at the last drive in the first half, but they only scored 7 points in the second half, and they coast thinking, you know what, man, we're going to coast. We're going to go into a bye, get ready. And I understand that, Chris. Like, I fully understand that being a thing. Brian Kelly running out a lot of freshmen. But that's a big thing too, man. I don't want to say that they've missed on not this past year's recruiting class, but the year before. I do think that they missed on some guys, but they're playing a lot of freshmen. And so when you have young guys, you have a lot of inconsistency. Now, look, I don't care what anybody says. If you're going to go with the transitive property theory of, well, Ole Miss beat South Carolina pretty handedly. Well, I mean, how can you look at your last 2 weeks and say that? I think that, Chris, more this year than anything, it's like in the NFL, in the SEC, it's teaching us something. Styles make fights, okay? And so I'm going to continue to say that all week. What style wins this one? Can LSU, who's now found a little bit more of a running game, Chris, can they run the football? I mean, look, LSU in the second half had more rushing yards, technical net rushing yards, in the second half versus South Carolina than you had in the game. And I think that there comes a part where you look at this LSU team from where they started to where they're at. I don't think that we I think that we undervalue Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas. Look, you got a lot that you had to replace on offense, but they've gotten steadily better every week. Chris, if I would have told you in the beginning of the season that this LSU defense would jump 75 spots from where they were statistically this time last year, think about this. They went into the Ole Miss game ranked 115th in the country in total defense. Right now, they're sitting around 56, 57, 58, depending on where you look at. So I think that not only that, they've been able to do some good things. And I think the key in this game and the key that it's been for LSU, Chris, they've been able to get after the quarterback and generate turnovers. The problem has been USC, South Carolina, etc., that when they're getting big stops or turnovers defensively, they cannot turn around and then go down and score. Here's the truth. Against South Carolina in the first half and in second half, Lenore Sellers was out. Well, Lenore Sellers had two turnovers in 3 minutes of play. Yeah, please continue to play him. He's going to continue to turn the football over. So they got to play complementary football. I know that every fan that watches your channel, Chris, is going to like, please stop with the coach speak. But, Chris, it's coach speak for a reason. It's coach speak because you got to go out there for 4 quarters and dominate during those 4 quarters. So, Chris, if the team that I know that has the ability in this place at night, you can win this football game. It's now going to come down to the fact of, are you going to live up to who you are and your potential? And I think that they have not lived up to their potential so far. And I think that is, if you're going to look at LSU, that's the motto that you got to go with is consistently inconsistent.
Blake, over the last few weeks, LSU's defense, you mentioned them, loses Harold Perkins Jr. for the season. I want to zero in on that, Blake, and I want you to shed some light on. I've had conversations with you off the record. I've had some conversations with others why not only are LSU folks not panicking, but maybe they don't feel like it's as big of a deal as maybe others nationally that don't follow LSU as closely think. Can you shed some light? Yeah. Why is the loss of Harold Perkins Jr. not as big of a deal as some folks are going to want to make it out to be?
Because you haven't played anybody that can stress you, right? And so you've been good without it. I mean, Chris, they've given up 20 points the last 2 weeks. I mean, Chris, I said this week. I posted on Twitter, so I guess I could say it here. You would have sold yourself if LSU at any point last year defensively only gave up 20 points. I mean, you would have. And so I think that saying that Harold Perkins not being there is a benefit to LSU, I think that's BS. Because, Chris, here's what I know when we watch film on Sundays. I mean, we got the screen right here in the studio where we're breaking down the all-22 copy. Of course, I know he didn't have a sack. I get that. But as a former O-lineman myself, what did they do? Chris, they did everything that you're not supposed to do in pass protection and shaded to him everywhere he went. So Braden Swinson, which we're talking about the South Carolina game, Braden Swinson was back-to-back defensive SEC player of the week because he's getting one-on-one matchups with tight ends because they're shading Harold Perkins on the opposite side of Braden Swinson. I don't like, for me, in situations like that, I don't care if Harold Perkins had a sack all year or not. Okay. You're able to scheme up a really good pass rusher. And because everybody's focusing in on 7, that 4 is able to go off. Now, I don't think in pass pro, Chris, you have that. You don't have that, right? And I think that people saying that, him not being there, they'll be better. That's BS. That's complete BS. However, in the running game, Chris, I do think that they get better because they're able to play a little bit better in reference to the skill set of true linebacking play. So where I think you get better in one area, you vastly get worse in another. Like, think about this. South Carolina a couple of weeks ago had 3 turnovers, all generated because Harold Perkins was a disruptor. Everything that they did, Chris, they're sliding their protection. They're in the far left hash of South Carolina. They're sliding their protection left. As a guy that played center, that is the biggest no-no, unless you have somebody that can, like, that you got to key in on. Now, South Carolina is 133rd out of 133rd teams in pass pro. So, yeah, they suck. So, but regardless, it's not just them that did it. USC did it. UCLA did it. Eric Bieniemy is still a really good OC, and being at UCLA, they did the same thing. So I think that that's the biggest loss. However, they have been so much better in the run game, Chris, without him being there for a half and then without him being there for South Alabama. Now, LSU is 44th in the country in run defense, but 6 of the 13 touchdowns that they've given up have come on long runs. If they can eliminate those explosive plays and be more fundamentally correct in things that they're doing, we came into the season and said this D-line is boo-boo. Well, baby, I'm just going to tell you, they might not be. And so I know it's a long-winded answer about Harold Perkins, but I don't know how else to answer it if you don't talk about those 2 categories of what his impact is on each side of those. And I didn't even talk about coverage because I think it's somewhat of a wash, right? Like, I mean, tomato, as I like to quote the great Lil Wayne.
Blake, as we zero in this game on Saturday night in Death Valley, the Magnolia Bowl, LSU and Ole Miss, rivalries are what make college football great and truly make it as special as it is. And I think you mentioned you've been one of the few calling it the Magnolia Bowl. And I want you to shed some light, Blake, because you mentioned to me, for the younger LSU fan, and maybe some tuned in, they're like, why is this guy hyping up this game? LSU, Ole Miss, like, they're not really rivals. Alabama's the biggest rival. You made it very clear to me that is not the case. If you do enough digging and you talking to enough fans, this game has a lot of meaning and there was a lot of hatred. I want you to shed some light to the viewers on just the severity of this LSU Ole Miss game and the depths and the levels that it goes to between these two teams.
My generation, Chris, I say my generation, like we're not the same exact age. Our generation looks at LSU over 2 decades of Nick Saban being at Bama versus LSU. Chris, it was the #1 watch game in the regular season for 17 straight years. I mean, whoever won that game either won a national title or was winning the SEC West, right? I mean, like, name them. LSU was second behind Bama in national championships over the last 2 decades. Why? Well, it came down to that game. I mean, this Bayou Burrow Jesus behind me, I mean, that's the epicenter of what that means. But, Chris, if you talk to our parents' generation, like Billy Cannon in 1959, okay, on Halloween night, running one back, winning the Heisman, like their rival, okay, that pure adulterate hatred that you have for Oxford and Baton Rouge is not missed upon me because I grew up in it. And I think that when the older people, the older generation, Chris, the people that we think, it's just the young people that are going to go there and be loud. No, sirree. This, because of this game meaning the magnitude that it is. And I think it has not had this level of magnitude at night since Lenny Fournette and the boys were here and they upset Ole Miss after Ole Miss had just beaten, if you remember, with Cocaine Bo Wallace, okay, when they beat Alabama, and then they come in here under Hugh Freeze, okay, and they're a top 7, top 6 ranked team. Leonard Fournette goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, not talking about the bird, Okay, they go nuts and they win the football game. Chris, that was another time that this place shook. And the reason that is because the deep hatred that you have from our parents' generation. So when you talk about this game and this game being a rival, this is why I didn't like not necessarily having permanent opponents. Because, Chris, like LSU doesn't play Auburn this year. That was a staple of who we were. Going to Auburn and coming out of a win with 3 points is an LSU tradition. So I think that part of it is that there is more hatred for the older crowd at Ole Miss than anybody else. And Saban's not here. So they're generating their focus back to traditional rivals. I remember my uncle saying, hey, what's the difference between an LSU fan and an Ole Miss fan? If the Ole Miss fan pisses on his hands and doesn't wash them after he leaves the urinal, like stupid itsy bitsy jokes like that. Like I have an uncle that's an Ole Miss booster, alum. I have multiple uncles that went to LSU. Okay, they hate each other. I mean, like this week they hate each other, and I'm right here in the middle. I'm like, I don't, it is what it is. But you think about the great games, Chris. Last part of this, Eli Manning falls because he got his foot stepped on. Both of those teams were national title contenders in 2003 with Saban. Those are those games, those matchups, those situations. And Ole Miss has been up and down, so it hasn't really helped LSU that one of their bigger rivals either is really good or they really stink. So that's why this place is going to be raucous. It's because you're going to have the older generation that's going to be out there wanting this one more than anything.
Blake, Ole Miss has been as up and down as any, especially as they dove into conference play, right? Obviously waxed the first 4 games in non-conference, but lose to Kentucky in a shocker in Oxford. They bounced back last week, beat South Carolina, but even in that game, it doesn't look quite, I think, especially on the offensive side, what we were expecting from the Rebels. I heard you talking about this week, Blake. They can't run the football, which is just astonishing. They're very well maybe without Trey Harris in this game. Defensively, they've been salty. They've been really good on defense.
Yes.
When you look, Blake, at Ole Miss specifically, what do you see as some areas that you feel like LSU can take advantage? And what are some areas that you see from Ole Miss that give you some concern in regards to matchups on Saturday night?
I don't know if they can exploit this. It's going to be something that they're going to have to if they win, though, Chris. If you look at this game at the end of it, LSU does X. That's why they win. Look, I don't know if you saw the argument I got in last night. I say argument. Let me call it a debate because we weren't yelling at each other or anything, but the debate I got in with Ole Miss fans on Twitter last night. We're 24th in the country in run offense. Interesting. Then why is it that you can't run when it's all you're doing in the second half? Chris, they threw the ball once in the fourth quarter against South Carolina. Once.
Blake, to your point, their numbers are very skewed too.
Very.
They were putting up like 700 yards a game in non-conference.
No doubt.
I mean,
so when you just look at the numbers and what they're doing in the running game, Chris, I mean, I'm not trying to say that LSU's defense is Kentucky's or South Carolina's. I don't care what anybody tells me. South Carolina's defense is salty. That dude Kilgore, they need to take the Gore off of it because that dude can play. Chris, the problem is, okay, that they have not been able to sustain the running game, which then hurts the RPOs behind it. You've been 2-1 dynamic in the passing game going to Trey Harris, which, by the way, Trey Harris is from Louisiana. You talk to anybody in the 337, shout out Lafayette, the kid's going to go. I'll say it on here. The kid's going to go. At least I would bet Pyran's, where we're going to eat on Friday night. I would bet your dinner that he goes. Okay, like he's gonna go. So I think that they have been very interesting to watch offensively. Chris, coming into the season, I thought they would lean on offense because they got so many pieces that they're having to figure out on defense. Right, so many new guys. It's been the polar opposite the last 2 weeks. Chris, they went 1 for 10 on third down against Kentucky. They went 3 of 13 on third down against South Carolina. Let's look at the South Carolina game as an example. Chris, if they don't get those 3 turnovers, the 2 turnovers on down, which Shane Beamer's a blithering idiot for going for it. Everybody knew that you were going to use a special teams fake in the beginning of the game. Chris, they get 3 touchdowns based off of them getting the ball on their side of the field at the 35-yard line. Outside of that, they're struggling to move the football. So, again, I think that they can expose LSU. I'm not saying that LSU can't, that they're that level of defense. But the reason that I'm so interested in this game is that, Chris, you ain't seen an offense that can throw that thing like this. I mean, and that's the part where I'm like, look, you're giving up 21 points a game. Okay. If LSU only gives up 21 points, Chris, it's a win. They're going to win the football game. It's going – Garrett Nussmeier drives me crazy when he throws the ball into triple coverage. However, he's good enough in spurts for long periods of time that he can do it. Now, Chris, defensively, you talked about them and their strength. Ooh-wee, man. Look, man, Walter Nolan is worth every penny. If he doesn't play another down, and I'm serious when I say this, he has earned every single penny that he's garnered. Him, J.J. Pegues, who, by the way, Chris, did you know was the top 10 in the SEC in rushing touchdowns?
4 rushing touchdowns, yeah.
A fat man. A fat man is hitting a juke stick on South Carolina to score. But he's really good in the run game defensively. Dude, I'm telling you this. One of my best friends is one of an associate GM of an NFL team. I texted him on Saturday. I'm like, brother, I want you to draft J.J. Pegues. Like, that kid is just so fun to watch. But their interior defensive line is good. Chris Paul has been fantastic. Princely Yellen, when he's been in there, I know he missed last week, but Princely Yellen has been really good. But, Chris, when he's out, Perkins, their level of Perkins comes in, Simon Perkins, and he's really good. That is what they've leaned on. Now, South Carolina's offensive line is dead last in pressure rate. They're dead last, or 132nd in run offense. Their interior offensive line stinks. Kentucky had a very bad offensive line. So now, if Ole Miss's defense and their D-line is who we think they are, you're about to get the biggest test. I don't think Georgia's offensive line is as good as LSU's. Okay, not right now because of the injuries of Tate Ratledge, etc. We're gonna find out. And look, you want to make a statement? Do it against Will Campbell. You do it against Will Campbell and Emory Jones and both of those interior guys and Frazier and Dellinger. Okay, then you've done something. But Chris, I'm just telling you, I feel confident about that matchup from a pass rush standpoint. I dare you to blitz him. Now, Garrett's been skittish. He's been skittish at times in the pocket. He's been more nervous than a schoolboy sitting in a church altar when a girl that's right next to him that's got big hoo-has, all right? He's been nervous. He's been skittish. But the problem is, okay, when he's on point and they give him a clean pocket, which they've done all year, Chris, they've given up 1 sack, they've been flawless. So that's the matchup inside the matchup. If LSU is dominating that defensive line in the pass pro, Ole Miss might have a long night. Now, Chris, last thing I'd say here, Trey Amos, the far boundary right corner, has been very elite. He's been what I call handsy. I don't get too Rudy Poos about the holdings against Kentucky.
I was going to say he was grabby in the Kentucky game.
But, Chris, as Saban would tell you, they're not going to call it every time.
Right.
That's what their DBs teach. They're gonna throw it to me every time. I mean, they're going to call it on me every time? No. Their far left boundary corner, Chris, they've put in 5 different guys that I've seen just on film and in the last 5 weeks. That is, I think that is what LSU. I know LSU is going to come out and exploit that. It might not be early. They might try to do it late to kind of lull them in and keep somebody out there that they want in a favorable matchup. But they have weaknesses. Their safety position, it might be a little bit of a weakness, because they have not seen a receiver in the slot that can do things like Aaron Anderson has. So matchups inside matchups, Chris, is all over the board. You're not going to be able to see everything through the first go-around when it's live, but I'm so interested in at least 6 different positions on how LSU and Ole Miss attack one another. So we'll see. And listen, I know Pete. I've known Pete Golding a long time. Pete, Chris, he grew up 6 miles away from my house. He coached at Southeastern. Everything that he's done to right now in the season, throw it out the window. Completely toss it out because it's not what he's going to do this week. I'm telling you, he has never come into Baton Rouge or a game against LSU and not sent the heat. Just not going to happen with Pete. He's not going to just rush forward. So matchups inside of matchups is so key in this one.
Really quickly, Blake, do you trust Garrett Nussmeier to not make those critical mistakes? Because I can't admittedly get the burning image out of my head of some of the crucial mistakes he got away with in that South Carolina game. And to your point, if they bring the heat, I think he could pick Ole Miss apart, but he cannot make those back-breaking mistakes. I know you know that, but that's the thing that worries me.
Yeah, it worries me too. I mean, Chris, I've taken a lot of heat from LSU fans, a plethora amount, as my mom would be very happy that I use a very big word like that, a plethora. Look, Chris, I've been very much hit by my own fan base and talking about Nussmeier. Chris, the truth is he probably should have lost you the game against South Carolina, okay? Yeah. And he threw 2 interceptions against South Alabama. And that's like everybody wants to call him a gunslinger and Brett Favre. He's like Brett Favre.
The Cajun Brett Favre.
The Cajun Brett Favre. Knock, knock, knock. Chris, you know why Brett Favre only has 1 Super Bowl? Because he turned the football over in critical moments. Okay? And so people want to look at Brett Favre as a Hall of Famer. Hey, brother, he leads the NFL in all-time interceptions. So I don't care that he's throwing it in quadruple coverage. Okay? Like that doesn't so what? You got a big arm. Like, and he's got to be flawless, Chris. He's got and listen, if he goes 21 for 28 for 275, 2 touchdowns and no picks, win. The problem that I have is if he goes, 29 of 38 for 360, 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, people are like, oh man, he's lighting it up. When did those 2 interceptions come? Where did they come? When did they come in the time of the game? Turnovers to me, and this was built into me for a long time. Chris, I hate turnovers. I've said this all year, and I'm going to continue to preach this. Jaden Daniels' best ability last year, Chris, was not him running the football. It wasn't him throwing it to Megatrons and aliens, okay, out there and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. It was his ability to not turn the football over. It like that in and of itself, if your defense is as bad as you think that it is, then you can't turn the football over. You cannot do that. But that was Jaden's best ability, and that's why he's completing 85% of his passes in the NFL. Ridiculous, by the way. But you got to hold on to take a sack. And Chris, some of that has been too, to the point, he's been skittish, and I don't know if he wants to take hits, so he's gonna throw that thing. I ain't taking that hit. That big old 350-pound dude ain't hitting me. And if he does hit me, it's going to be a flag. Got to sit in that pocket, baby. Got to sit in that pocket and take hits. They'll protect you. Now, look, Garrett has made elite throws. Love a lot of things that he's done. Chris, I think he's on the cusp of being really good to really great. Okay, like I see the really good throws and decisions he makes. I also see the Rudy Poo candy ass mistakes that he makes that can lose you football games. If you do it in this one, you're going to lose. Like, I mean, the margin of error is so slim that I don't know, man. You got to make sure that you don't. I'd rather you punt it. I'd rather you just take the sack, throw it away, punt it, give this defense a chance. You cannot turn the football game in a critical situation in a game like this.
As the great Lou Holtz once said, Blake, end every possession in a kick, and you'll have a lot of success. Think about that one. Blake, I want to zero in on this. I heard you say this week, and I had you on heading into week 1 against USC. You called that the most important game of the Brian Kelly tenure to date. Well, they lost that football game, and they sit here at 4-1. I've heard you say this week, program-defining type of game in Baton Rouge on Saturday night between LSU and Ole Miss. And you even, Blake, made the point, which I think is interesting, and I don't think it's a shot. It's just reality. You said Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss can afford to lose this one because it's Ole Miss. LSU can't afford to lose this one. Expand on that program-defining game for Brian Kelly and Brian Kelly's tenure in Baton Rouge.
Chris, if Ole Miss goes 8-4 this year, it would be like, oh man, they wasted an opportunity. It's Ole Miss. I hate saying it, like it's Ole Miss. But Chris, you went out and did something in getting Brian Kelly that changed the landscape. It got Mel Tucker $100 million. LSU's search for a coach got Lincoln Riley paid. It got Mel Tucker paid. It got other coaches around the country paid. Jimbo was about to get another extension, and then they were like, no, you suck. We're not going to do that. Chris, where are you with Brian Kelly? Where are you? Where are you as a program? And as much as people think I'm overreacting, Chris, I've done over 2,000 episodes of podcasting, of talk and sports talk. What do I know about my own fan base? What do I know about people in the national media is that if he loses this game, Brian Kelly's a dud. Brian Kelly sucks. That's coming. And that weight of yet another year where you underperform and not deliver. Chris, we're having this discussion now. You tell me, you run a very successful business. You tell me what the perception is going to be of Brian Kelly if they lose 24-21.
People already love to throw shade at Brian Kelly as
100%.
And they think he's overrated. They think he's, like you said, he's a dud. He can't win the big one. He's never going to get over the hump. Yeah, it's a game like this. He has to win to combat that.
He's got to win it. And I say program defining. Let me explain program.
And by the way, that's not fair, That's not fair to Brian
Kelly.
But it's the take people run with.
Look, listen, me coming out here and listen, I'll tell you this. I'm not, they can kick me out. I don't care. Me saying that on Monday got me in trouble. Like I'm putting too much. Blake, you gotta calm down. I ain't calming down. No, this is reality, Chris. Like, I'm not here to make friends with anybody in the reference to what the reality is. I'm never going to give up what the reality and perception is going to be win, lose, or draw. Okay? What is the outcome going to be? And it's program defining because where are you? By the way, you have a lot of success right now in recruiting. Chris, listen, LSU, this place, we like to do stuff to ourselves. Like, we like to shoot our own foot and laugh and say, look at me, pow, shoot ourselves in the foot. We think it's entertainment. Brian Kelly isn't like that. He is more procedural in the things that he does. So when I look at him and I look at this situation, I know that, like, if he doesn't make the playoffs in year 3, and I know what people are going to say. Here's the headline that's going to be coming out of Baton Rouge. You ready? Every coach besides Brian Kelly won a national title in year 3. Saban, Les, Ed. What about Kelly? And Chris, I know that he's in a different era of NIL and portal, and it's not fair to him. But that is what it's going to define who they are. Because, listen, LSU missed on a lot of people in the portal. Ole Miss did not. So now you're going into this situation where who's going to combat, who's going to overcome their issues. So program defining, man. If they win, because Chris, I know that they got tough games against Arkansas after this, and then A&M. And I don't know if they can go 3-0 in that. That's going to be tough. But if Taylor Green's not playing, then what? What is Missouri? Did A&M really? They exposed them, but what are they really? They haven't really faced anybody that can consistently throw the football on them. Chris, they got a bye week, 3 hard games, a bye week, and then Bama. This is what Brian Kelly's getting paid $10 million a year for. You got to go 3-0. Mark them off. Get through this 3-game stretch. Then when Bama comes into town, you're going to bring your happy ass back to Baton Rouge. I'm telling you, I already know. You're going to bring your ass back down to Baton Rouge, and that's when this is, where are we? You got to win this one. They don't have the depth that you do. Bottom line, they don't, meaning Ole Miss. You got to be able to go out there and just – you just got to go win. If you win 3-0, I'm going to celebrate like it's 2000, man. You just got to go win. Get the W's, all I care about.
Blake, on the note of that last comment, I have to get your reaction to this.
Oh, no.
Our friend Brad Logan joined both of us actually this week, does a great job with the Believe Network and all of his different ventures. He's on so many shows I can hardly keep up. But Brad does a great job talking all things Ole Miss. Blake, he said this over the course of the offseason when I previewed the Ole Miss football season with him. He said it again this week, that he believes Ole Miss has the better roster top to bottom, that on paper Ole Miss should win this football game. You believe LSU's got more depth. So I ask you, who's right?
I love Brad, so I'm not trying to be rude. Where do they have more depth? Where? You tell me. Is it a receiver? No. You're panicking that Trey Harris might not play. LSU might be out with CJ Daniels, and they got Megatron and Megatron Jr. and Megatron the third that they can just throw out there. O-line play. Chris, LSU's got 4 or 5-star offensive linemen that are in their depth piece. Like, I mean, where? Maybe you could say D-line. Okay, fair. I got you. So maybe but what's behind Walter Nolan? Chris, if Walter Nolan accidentally rolls his ankle and's got to be out for a series, then what? Because I know where LSU's at. They put in 2 5-star freshmen and Don McKinley. So if you're going to talk about depth, I didn't say experience depth. If you're just talking about overall depth, no. Like, come on, bro. I mean, I love Brad, but I think if you went position by position, I mean, Chris, you tell me. You know, like you tell me, like maybe quarterback, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Running back. I mean, Chris, where's Ulysses S. Bennett the fourth? Where is he?
On a milk carton.
Yeah, he's on a milk carton. By the way, LSU's got a true freshman that's going off. So if you want to talk about depth pieces, they got a true freshman in Ahmad Bro that's killing it. So, yeah, man, I think that one team's got more depth, and that's LSU. Now, Chris, does it win you a football game? I don't know. I have no clue.
Blake, last thing, and I'll get you out of here. Again, appreciate you being gracious with your time.
No problem.
Key or keys to the game for LSU to get this win over Ole Miss?
I don't tell anybody this until Thursday, but since I love you, I'm going to tell you. Number one, you got to sustain drives. You got to run the football. Chris, the blueprint's out. You got to keep the ball away from Ole Miss. Look, get 3-4 yards in a cloud of dust. Don't go away from it. Number two, don't turn the football over. Number three, attack the far left boundary. Number four, I think that you can get to Jackson Dart pretty, I don't want to say easily, Chris. I think you can get to him. So with that, you got to get to him and get him down. Last thing I would say is the biggest thing for LSU going into this game, you can't get lost in coverage. Just like, look, let them get their yards. Let them catch it, get them down. Don't get lost. Know your assignments, know your roles, know what you need to do, and you'll be fine. Because this place will generate enough energy and it will generate enough buzz and noise to confuse and get things wrong for Ole Miss. Just do your assignments, Chris, and I think you'll be fine.
Blake Ruffino, AYS Sports, does a fantastic job talking all things LSU Tigers. And Ruffino and Joe Show talks college football nationally. They do a great job as well. Blake, appreciate you taking the time. In case folks have been living under a rock, let them know how to find you and all your great work.
Ruffino and Joe Show or AYS Sports. Go to YouTube, subscribe, Chris. I don't know if we have so far, but we're coming up on Ruffino and Joe Show to 10K subscribers. Just go over there and subscribe, man. You know that you love hearing us yell. So go over there, subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff, and wherever you listen to podcasts. We greatly appreciate it.
Blake, appreciate you taking the time and excited to see you in Baton Rouge, my friend.
We'll see you there.